The last time you waited for permission, you already knew what to do. Somehow in your mind, you're waiting for someone else to kind of take responsibility for a decision that you do not want to bear the responsibility of, just in case things didn't work out. I know that in your mind, you do not think that that is what it is, or you've convinced yourself that it's not what I'm saying. But you know it is. You did not need that permission. Now, I know that this conversation is on a spectrum, is on a wide spectrum. And there are people who don't even know that they don't need to take permission. And there are people who know, but it's been beaten out of them by parents or leaders or life. But my focus today is on the people who know not to take permission, but do it anyways, regardless of the reason, but they know not to. Maybe some other videos we will focus on other categories of people. So this video today, we're going to talk about it. The fact that you don't need permission. You just need the courage to accept that whichever way things go, good or bad, you're going to be fully responsible for it. That if you go on with your life or an activity or a task you've been asked to do without anybody's permission, that the responsibility falls on you if it goes south. Just the same way you would take all the glory if everything went good. You need to develop the courage to accept those kind of things with square shoulders. And I know that many of you have been delaying a lot of things for a long time because you've been waiting for permission. Welcome to day 3 of the Residency, guys. And today we're going to talk about the real reason you keep waiting for permission. Shall we begin? Okay, I like stories, so let's get into it. About 2 years ago, I lost someone very close to me, more like a cousin. I had called his sister in California just to make sure she's good, she's in a good spirit and all that. And in the middle of our conversation, she said, "Do you know the fondest memory I have of you?" I was curious to know, right? Just like you are curious to know now. And so I said, "What is this?" Then she said, "When you were much younger, like primary school age, you would tell your dad that you needed to have a meeting with everybody. Everybody, right? Your dad would call for a meeting and everybody would gather. And you would tell us in that meeting that you've been thinking about why you were the last born of the family. And through your thoughts and observations, you had discovered that the only reason you were last born is because all of us came together for some reason and decided to bring you into this world so that you could run errands for us. And that was it. And that you just wanted us to be aware that you understood our plan and that there's nothing you're doing that is out of ignorance." And then I laughed so hard. I laughed so hard because I remembered. But a lot has changed since then. It just, I just, a lot has changed since then. I'm telling you that story because I want you to understand something about who I was before life began to life me, right? Like Jesus would say, life be lifing. I was raised not to be a permission seeker or a people pleaser. If I needed to have a conversation with you, I would seek your audience. I grew up with a knowing. I wasn't even told, but I grew up with a knowing that I did not need permission to think and to express my thoughts. I grew up knowing that the way that my thoughts were expressed was important. That Somebody listening to me should not feel disrespected, regardless of the situation. I knew that my communication skills had to be top notch. And so I did not need permission to process my own thoughts, to own them, and to bring them into a conversation, into a room, or to present them as my opinion. I was not coming to make you feel inferior or to ask you to validate my opinions. My opinions were usually strong, they were good. They are still strong and good. But I come with mine, and I do not appear before anybody empty. But I also appear, especially before my mentors and the people that I really respect, with with an openness to receive new things. Even in my regular everyday conversation, I'm always very open to learn something from people. And so my parents gave me that freedom to speak and the dignity of being heard. And I truly cannot tell you how grateful I am for that, because not everybody my age had that opportunity. I was taught that every human being, our driver, cleaner, laundryman, the maid, even the last born of a Nigerian family, has some dignity that was not negotiable. The dignity did not come from what they did or who they were. It was just by being human beings created in God's image. That's enough dignity, and it was not negotiable. And so I always spoke up. I carried that with me into my teenage years, my early adult life. I had some leadership positions growing up from secondary school: head girl, timekeeper, deputy fellowship president, evangelism coordinator. I had all those going on. Then head girl again. So I was not a reckless person or disrespectful. I understood the protocols of power growing up in the kind of environment that I grew up in. And I understood the hierarchies of authority and how to handle different roles. But nonetheless, I was free. And I moved without waiting for doors to open for me, because it had never occurred to me that I needed somebody's hand on the handle to open it. And the truth about life is that there are times you need somebody's hand on the handle to open certain doors for you. In fact, I used to joke as in my early 20s, I used to joke with my friends that if a door was shut, by the time I'm like one step to touching the handle, it opens. Then until probably when I hit 22, 23-ish, something happened. Ah, yeah. At that time, I had somebody that I, you know, called a mentor. She was a mentor to me, and I really looked up to her so much, maybe a little too much. And she said something to me that absolutely changed everything. So I had an idea. I was young, right? And I had this crazy idea. In fact, the idea was so strong that I had to chase down a particular former governor's wife in Nigeria who had something similar going for her, just to pick her mind about it. It was something that I really held on to for years. And so I spoke to my mentor at that time about it. And she said, "Oh, this is not for people like you or people like us. It's for the extremely rich people. They're the ones who do things like that." And then she went on to describe the kind of people it was for. 5 words or 6 words, said by one person on an ordinary afternoon to a young girl who had spent her entire life walking into rooms, speaking without asking for permission. It changed everything for me. It was the first time in my life that anyone had told me I could not do something. And because it came from someone I respected so much, not just as a human being, but as a spiritual figure, it, it shattered me. Now, I think I have a better perspective of things. So I thought about it over the years. And this is how I say it. I do not believe that person said what she said to damage me. And like I said, I have thought about it for years, and it always brought me back to this same place. The person spoke from her own experience, from her own perception of what was possible, because the person is a kind of perfectionist, right? And likes things to go a particular way and likes to know the outcome of something before they happen. And so she's gone through certain circumstances in her life and with her age, and she concluded that certain things were not possible for a girl my age in the environment I was in. And so the ceiling she had put on herself on what was possible, she had applied it to my own potential. Maybe some form of short-sightedness. And I say that without being insulted. I found myself short-sighted in certain situations too. And even my mentees had picked it out and told me, I don't think this is correct. And my mentors are, helped us as well. And so that short-sightedness became a filter through which she assessed what someone like me could reach for in life. I don't believe she was cruel. I felt that the limitations of her own perspective and experiences she had gone through had put a limitation on what she thought was okay or doable. And she had extended that to me without knowing. And that is why every time I interact with my mentees, maybe not every time, but as much as possible, I let them know. And I tell them that this rule must be applied to me too, as their mentor. Is that a person's ability or inability to see your potential is not evidence that the potential does not exist. So I always tell them that even if I can't see it, it does not mean that it is not there. And so what I say or what I do should not be the basis for which you don't do what you're extremely convinced of doing. And the truth is, when you take someone else's boundaries or the boundaries that someone else has put on their own vision and you use it as a ceiling over your life, you're already digging a hole to bury yourself. And so I was really hurt at that time because I was really young and I did not have the tools to separate someone's perception from my own reality. Now I have those tools, and that's why I give them to young people, so that when you're having a conversation with someone, you should be able to see their perspective and their perception of you and the situation, and you should also be able to see the reality and what you see as a person, and you should be able to know the difference and whether or not you want to continue with what you want to do and how to do that in a way that is absolutely not disrespectful. And so I trusted her more than I had trusted what I already knew about myself, because I could not bring the separation between her perception of me and my own reality. And that was how those words shattered my life. And I did not even notice immediately. Things were still going well on the outside. I was still who I was. I was still going for events. I was still being invited to speak at places, being told to coach people. But inside me, something had shifted. In the past, when I brought an idea to you, I was usually very confident about it. But after that conversation, I started watching people's faces, see their body language, measure their reaction when I said something. Then I started adjusting the size of what I had to say to fit into what I thought people could accept or hold or can take. Before that conversation, when I asked you what you thought about something, I was not looking for validation. I was hoping that you would pick something that I've missed or give me another perspective that would help my idea, or explain that, oh, I think you're missing this, right? But after that conversation, I started asking what people thought as a way of getting permission in disguise. Like, tell me if I should do this thing or not, but I'm not going to ask you directly. So I just say, what do you think? And then one day, maybe 3 or 4 years down the line, I looked at myself and I asked one question that just caused me to pause or just stopped me in my tracks. I said, hey, Ibukun, how did you get here? How did you get here? Because the person standing in that moment, till I realized that, was not the girl who called family meetings. I was not that person who was leading people or whom organizations will bring into strategy sessions. And I kept asking, how did you get here? It was as if I had like a spiritual awakening moment that my soul saw my body, or my body saw my soul. I'll try to say. And then I was asking, how did she get here? Where where has she gone? Why did I let her go without fighting for her? And I just realized what had happened to me. Now I want to come back to where I started, because I meant it when I said the last time you waited for permission, you already knew what to do. And you just wanted someone else to take responsibility if things went south or if things went wrong. And again, maybe you were raised to look for permission, to seek validation. Maybe you did not even know that there was a possibility to think for yourself and own your own thoughts because of various conditioning. Maybe your boldness was beaten out of you as a child or by life. All of that. I thought about all of that. But despite all the maybes, I still strongly feel that there is something in you that fights to say no, that wants to stand up and say something and do something and just take the next step. You don't need to involve everybody in your next step. The people I'm really focused on here are the ones who know that if they did something without asking for permission, they would have to take full responsibility for their actions. If you're going to say the success is yours when it works, you should also be able to accept the failure when it doesn't work. The day you conclude that in your mind is going to be a very liberated day for you. Because right now you're just terrified of living life. Many of you are. Some people like to accept the success but push back or try to push the failure or the responsibility for failure on somebody else. That is the only reason that you keep asking for permission, because trusting your own judgment has hurt you before. And so it feels safer to make sure that someone else takes responsibility for what you do. But when you live like that, your instincts die. Instincts are extremely important. In fact, I think I should do like a whole series on instincts. I might do that. And so when you live in that cycle of seeking permission, your instincts die. Seeking permission all the time will also cost you timing. Because the moment an idea is ready is usually not the time the person you're seeking permission from is ready to execute that idea. It also costs you originality, because every idea that passes through someone else's approval first comes out adjusted. Something has been taken out of it. It's different when you sit down with someone to brainstorm an idea. But if you needed somebody's approval to go ahead to do something, it's at the end of the day will not be the original thought you had. Especially when the people you are asking for are not wired to do big things. And so you need to get out of that cycle of seeking approval and get into one that it requires you to think thoughtfully and take responsibility um, for things. And it's not going to be, coming out of that cycle is not going to be a clean break, because you've already built a version of yourself that always sought after people, what they think, what you should do. And they've come to expect you to do that all the time. And so when you start moving without doing that, you begin to appear to be proud or rebellious. Some people will decide that you've changed and you're now a bad person and you're heading toward destruction. And so you have to come to a place where you, yourself, and God decide that you're going to move regardless, regardless of the interpretations that come with it. I want to be very clear here. I am not starting a conversation about dishonoring people in your life. The people God has placed in your life who have wisdom, experience, and genuine love for you. There are people whose counsel is worth seeking. But in my observation, those people usually don't. They tell you that what they're giving you is counsel and that the final decision is yours. That's why I said I have mentors, and I don't even joke with conversations I have with them, no matter how simple. So there are mentors and leaders and trusted voices whose perspective will genuinely deepen your thinking, sharpen your thinking. That kind of relationship is sacred. And so don't take it like a joke. And this is why I don't have a lot of mentees. Because some people just want you to be an approval mechanism for them. And some people just need you to validate every idea. They want you to give them fish, but not take them to fish. And that's why I don't do a lot of mentees. What I'm talking about is something different. I'm talking about the habit of seeking approval from people who were never meant to be gatekeepers of your ideas. People whose opinions you've elevated to a position where they were never qualified to hold. People who, when you bring them to the fullest of your thinking, they make you smaller rather than sharper. And so most of this time, these people are not wicked. They're just human beings. They're not evil. They're not witch hunting you. They're just human beings. And they're limited in their perception of life and how things work. And they probably put a cap over their own life experiences, or put a cap over their own lives based on the experiences they've seen. And they genuinely believe that in many cases, they are helping you out by showing you that there's a ceiling here, you can't go above here. But the ceiling is theirs and not yours. And the moment you accept their ceiling as your own ceiling, you're going to get less out of life. And so I always tell people, God sees your heart. God sees my heart. I see my heart. I know my intentions. And at some point, I have to do what I have to do. And so the journey of pulling out of being an approval-seeking person is not a very beautiful journey. And sometimes it can be lonely because you are becoming yourself again in the original intent of God. You can seek counsel, you can be mentored, you can be tutored, but you're not supposed to be a people pleaser or an approval-seeking human being. So that little girl who called family meetings is still somewhere in each of you. You all have that version of that person. He did not leave, she did not leave. But because of the things you've had to live through, experience, the conditioning and all, you just made that person quiet. Someone who doesn't fully understand the context of your own existence and reality made you believe that your voice needed somebody's signature on before it could be used. Your voice doesn't. It should not. It never did. And so here is what I want you to do today. And this is a private task. I want you to sit down and answer this question honestly, or these questions honestly. Who have I been asking for permission that I was never supposed to need permission from? And so, okay, it's a question. And so I want you to name the person. If it's a person, name the person. If it's a system, name the system. If it's an organization, name the organization. If it's a voice in your head, name that voice. Name everything you have put as a gatekeeper of your ideas. Write them all down. And then underneath that, write, this was not theirs to give, and I'm taking it back. Because they were never designed to give you permission. So tell that to yourself and mean it. So you already knew what to do. You always knew what to do. Go and do it. Go and write that book. Go and start that business. Go back to school. Even at 50. Even at 55. Start that program. Apply for that job. Hug your kids. Tell your husband I love you. Tell your wife I love you. Dress nicely. Look good. Everything that you've always wanted to do within the boundaries of moral construct. At least get it done. You don't need permission anymore. So, root deep, burn slow. The world will know eventually. See you tomorrow.